Hi, welcome everybody. So I recorded this short video for all of you because there were some students that were wondering on where some percentages came from when analyzing a pedigree that some of you saw in lecture. So in particular, you talk about a disease called Huntington's disease, which I'm not actually sure if it exists or not. But what the core of the problem is that there are two close relatives that are marrying together, and they're wondering what is the probability that their child is gonna have the disease, given that they know that their shared common ancestor had the disease. So this disease is represented here in the allele for the gene H, and is a capital because it is a dominant relative to the wild type. This is a this is a rare mutation, a rare allele. So we assume that the people entering the pedigrees that were not originally part of the family do not carry the disease. So the first thing that we can analyze is what is going to be the probability that this individual is called me. In the example, what is the probability that I am gonna inherit I'm gonna be inheriting this particular disease? And the fact is that even though this is an dominant mutation for expressing the disease, people don't necessarily express it early on life. So even though we are not expressing the disease, doesn't mean that we don't have it or that we are homozygote recessive. So the first thing that we can do is to make a Punnett square. And here it becomes clear what are the two possible genotypes that I can inherit from my from my parents, right? So 1/2 is gonna be capital H, lowercase h, and the other half is gonna be homozygote recessive. So we need to analyze these two scenarios and keep going down on each of the individuals that are going to be involved in the marriage, right? So let's take this individual on the left, my son. These two trees are representing the two different scenarios on the genotype that I could have inherited from my parents, right? In this scenario, I am inheriting this genotype. In this scenario on the right, I inherited the homozygote recessive genotype. Okay, so let's focus on me being a heterozygote first. As a heterozygote, knowing that my first partner is gonna be homozygote recessive, we form the Punnett square to see what are the different genotypes and frequencies in which my son can have. So in this case, we have the capital H, lowercase h, and lowercase h, right? So again, with a frequency of 1/2 and 1/2 for each, right? Or as expressed in this Punnett square is 2 out of 4 and 2 out of 4. So those are the two possible genotypes that we can give our child, which are represented in here. So let's focus on this possible outcome. We know that there is 1/2 a chance that I'm gonna be a carrier. That's how we ended up going to the left scenario, the left tree. Assuming that I am a carrier, the probability that I'm gonna pass my mutant allele is again gonna be 1/2. Therefore, adding another half to our calculations, right? So assuming that this individual is a heterozygote, we can proceed to build our Punnett square between this individual and then the individual that would go in here. if you do the same calculation that I'm showing you here for my daughter, you will see that the probability of this individual being a capital H, lowercase h, is the same one, right? Which is going to be also 1/2 here, coming from 1/2 in here. Therefore, the probability of this individual being a heterozygote would be a 1/4, same as this one. Now, we make our Punnett square and identify those genotypes in our Punnett squares that are gonna show the disease, carrying at least one mutant allele for this Huntington's disease. And it is these 3 out of 4 possible outcomes. So the only thing that we have left is to multiply them. So we have 1/4, considering the uncertainty from my son, times 1/4, considering the uncertainty of my daughter, times the number of the different phenotypes, that the different genotypes that can produce the phenotype for Huntington's in the marriage, right? They call it mating, in the mating here. So this is gonna give us a total of 3 out of 64. Okay, so most of you had this part pretty well figured out. What became a little confusing is, why is the probability of this individual 3/4? And the reason why it's 3/4 is because, even though if you consider this one, the probability of being a heterozygote is still being 1/2, but passing this allele is going to be of 1/2 again, forming 1/4 here. This is not the only possible path which can give us this particular genotype. And this is where we look at the other possible scenario on the right tree. And if we look at the scenario on the right, where I am instead a homozygote recessive, what we can see is that the probability of being a carrier of this disease it just fades away, right, down along the pedigree. Therefore, here all of the individuals have this same genotype. All the possible genotypes are going to be the same one as this one over here. And this is going to be 100%, or 4/4, right, which equals 1. So we multiply 1/2, which is the probability of getting this genotype, times 1, which is the probability of getting these genotypes, and that gives us 1/2, or 2/4. And then we add it to our 1/4 in here, giving us a total of 3/4. So that's where the 3/4 come from. Okay, so what we end up with is some sort of like a combination of calculations that we need to do. So we know that my son can be either of these 2 genotypes, and so can be my daughter, right? So at the end, we need to compare this one with the 2 possible scenarios for my daughter, and this genotype from my son, again with these 2 possible scenarios from my daughter. And this is what we have here. So we know from the previous slide that the probability of getting this individual is of 1/4, right? The probability of getting this daughter with this genotype is also 1/4. And then we make our Punnett square. Giving us our 3/4. Then we multiply them together. And this gives us again our 3 out of 64, which is the same calculation that I showed before. As we proved on the previous slide as well, the probability of this individual, my daughter, being a homozygote recessive is 3/4, and therefore we just make the Punnett square, and then only half of the possible genotypes are gonna be carriers of the disease, which is 1/2. Okay, so we do the calculation. Is 1/4 coming from here times 3/4 times 1/2, and this should give us, for simplicity, I'm gonna consider these 2/4, so that it gives us 64. And this is going to give us 6, right? So this is 6. And we do the exact same procedure for the scenario when we have a son which is homozygote recessive. In this case, the probability of getting this individual with this genotype is 3/4, and then 1/4 for the daughter, and 3/4 for the other scenario of the daughter. So at the end, we don't really care about these ones because 2 homozygote recessives are not going to give us the disease, right? So we only care about these ones. At the end, we are adding these probabilities together. So we're going to calculate these ones, and again, it's going to be 3/4 times 1/4 times times 1/4. Sorry, times 1/2, right? Which is here. Which gives us, again, being 2/4 equals 6 out of 64. And from here below, we have 0. Okay, so we have from this one 6 out of 64, from this one 3 out of 64, and from this one 6 out of 64. So this is 15 out of 64, which is exactly what the answer key that Craig was showing you corroborated.